far as I'm concerned, Infinity Inc. has already ascended.
I've watched Breaking Bad. I've watched Mad Men. I've watched The West Wing. I've watched Always Sunny. I've watched a lot of good shows. And do you know what my favorite show of all time is? Young Justice. Okay, Better Call Saul's actually my favorite show. Then there's The Simpsons, and anyway, Young Justice is definitely up there. This is a cartoon, so the first question you're probably going to ask is, how is this show as good as a bunch of the other greatest shows of all time? There's a lot to it, but this show has perfect continuity. If something gets brought up, it's gonna get resolved at some point. There's no abandoned plot threads, everything builds on itself, and characters actually make decisions based on things that have happened. It's not just characters picking sides because they need to serve the plot. Let's take an example of this good writing. One plot thread that I really enjoyed is Lex Luthor's evolution throughout the series. Lex first appeared on the show as a negotiator to a peace treaty, and then in season 2 he sides with the heroes to help stop an alien invasion. That way he can get the public on his side, and then because of this, he ends up as the Secretary General of the United Nations. Every character has natural progression and plot threads like this. Dick Grayson, Wally West, Miss Martian, Aqualad, Superboy, every character in this is unique and well developed. They stay faithful to the way these characters act in the comics. This portrayal of Dick Grayson is spot on, but they aren't afraid to change or add things to make the universe better. For example, there's no Speed Force in Young Justice. Wally West just has his powers because he got struck by lightning. There's no need to spend hours talking about the Speed Force and how it works. It's always used as a crutch for writers to say the Flash can do anything. I'm looking at you, CW Flash. Then there's the show-created characters like Aqualad, and even these characters are well written. Aqualad's the son of Black Manta, but he trained under Aquaman to learn to love Atlantis. So there's always the constant tension of whether or not Aqualad is more like his father, and they build on this every season. Every character, every story, every detail is painstakingly added to create the perfect iteration of the DC universe. And then the show got canceled, because of low toy sales or something. But by some miracle, it was brought back, and Young Justice Outsiders was born. And how do I feel about it?
Whelmed.
Now, I've seen a lot of criticism of this season online. People are talking about how it's horrible and how it ruined their favorite show. Nah, Young Justice Outsiders is good. The attention to detail and the character development are still there. It's a natural continuation of the main series. Season 2 is largely about aliens invading Earth and activating humans' metagenes, which would activate their superpowers, which is totally not a ripoff of mutants. And this season is largely about metahumans being trafficked as an exploitable resource. It's a really natural transition. And on top of that, the season's full of some of the best episodes in the entire series. If you haven't watched Evolution yet, go watch it. I can't believe how many plot threads are tied together in one single episode. And wait until you get to the part about the bear. But there is one massive problem with this season. And I mean a really, really big problem. And that's the pacing. Now let's take a second and talk about what pacing is. Pacing is a word that gets thrown around a lot.
There were some real pacing issues.
I think that could have helped with the pacing.
There are numerous slow and sluggishly paced scenes.
The pacing in Captain Marvel feels like something out of a student film.
And a lot of people hate this term because they don't think it means anything. But I'm gonna go ahead and defend all these critics. I think pacing is a real problem. So, what is it? Pacing is usually split up into two categories. One is how the story is edited, and one is how the story is written. But I think pacing comes from both aspects. And pacing can be how the whole season is paced, how a single episode is paced, or even just how a single scene is paced. A lot of people say that if the pacing is good, you don't notice it at all, which I somewhat agree with. Now, it's really easy to notice bad pacing, and that's because your body has a natural reaction to it. Boredom. But sometimes it's easy to notice good pacing. You just think, yeah, this is really good. Pacing is basically the rhythm of a story. You want it to strike a balance. If it's too fast, there's no weight to any of the action. If it's too slow, it's Blade Runner 2049. And I think music is a good way to compare pacing. Let's look at one of the best albums of all time, the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. In fact, Nerdwriter does something similar where he talks about Abbey Road, but I think Sgt. Pepper is another example of great pacing. It starts right off the bat with all the energy of the title track. And then it slows it down a bit with a little help from my friend. Each song guides you into the next. The sounds contrast each other, always giving you something new and exciting to listen to. You go from the weird uppity beats of Benefit of Mr. Kite into the spiritual Indian-inspired sounds of Within You Without You. Now what happens when the title track isn't at the beginning? There's not enough momentum to start the album. What if My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy didn't start with Dark Fantasy? What if Thriller didn't start with Wanna Be Startin' Something? That's the thing about a good album. It keeps you listening. That's what good pacing does. Now let's take an example of good pacing on the screen. I think Young Justice Season 2 is perfectly paced. The season is so tight, every episode builds upon the last, increasing tension. It starts with the team figuring out that aliens have invaded the planet, setting up the main conflict for the series, and it never skips a beat. The heroes immediately react, going on the offensive, setting up stealth missions to take the enemy down. Meanwhile, the aliens go public to try and outmaneuver the Justice League and win favor with the public. All while the villains of Earth end up in direct conflict with the aliens. And all this leads to the penultimate episode, Summit, where everything goes down. Every plot thread is resolved in it. It is perfectly paced. Now, it's also very, very fast-paced. The season's only 20 episodes long, and episodes are only 20 minutes long. And fast pacing doesn't always mean good pacing. Something can be slow-paced and still be paced well. Let's take 2001: A Space Odyssey, for example. This is hailed as one of the greatest movies of all time, and the first 20 minutes are just monkeys beating the shit out of each other. When I watched this movie the first time, I was sure I bought the wrong DVD. It is without a doubt slow. And some critics complained that this movie would be better if the pacing was faster. Nope. If the pacing was faster, it wouldn't be 2001. The pacing perfectly fits the story. And there's plenty of examples of movies like this. There Will Be Blood, Zodiac, and Eyes Wide Shut are all very slow movies, but they're intentionally slow. The pacing fits the story they were trying to tell. John Wick wouldn't get any better if the pacing was slow. The Social Network keeps a super brisk pace to keep up with Sorkin's dialogue. It's not about fast or slow, it's about finding a pace that enhances the overall story. So what's an example of bad pacing? Young Justice Outsiders. This season is so incredibly poorly paced. And considering it's made by the same people who made Season 2, that's just impressive. Now, everything that happens this season is objectively good. It's not what happens that's the problem, it's how it's all paced. Let's take the name of the season, for example. Young Justice Outsiders. Now, this is a show based on DC, so the name Outsiders already plants an idea in everyone's head. The Outsiders are a team of DC heroes led by Batman, when Batman was basically just kind of sick of the Justice League and wanted to start a team on his own terms. So going in, you figure, oh, that's what the season's going to be about. And right in the first episode, Batman leaves the Justice League, along with a whole bunch of other heroes, including people like Katana and Metamorpho, who were also members of the Outsiders in the comics. So you think, oh, that's why this season's called Outsiders. And then episode 6 happens. The start of the season is basically the old members of the team recruiting new members and training them. Geoforce is an exiled Prince of Markovia, Halo is a Deus Ex Machina in a dead girl's body, and
Forager is Forager.
So in episode 6, once these guys were getting a pretty good handle on their training, they called them, guess what, the Outsiders. And you're like, wait, what? Well, I guess that makes sense because we haven't seen Batman and his Outsiders since episode 1, like they literally just haven't done anything. And they aren't even called the Outsiders, they're called Batman Incorporated, which is another different team of superheroes in the comics. Also, the show's called Young Justice, so it's not even about Batman's team, so why call it Outsiders? But hey, it's all figured out. Batman's team is Batman Inc., and the new heroes are the Outsiders. Got it. Then halfway through the season, Beast Boy is tired of all the team's deception and lying, so he takes Blue Beetle, Kid Flash, Geoforce, and a bunch of irrelevant characters, makes his own superhero team called, guess what? The Outsiders. And if that's not bad enough, the entire narrative shifts focus from Brion, Halo, and Forager onto Beast Boy and the Outsiders. It's like they forgot their season was named Outsiders, so halfway through the season, they created Beast Boy's team and decided to follow what they were up to. And it's a shame because Beast Boy and the Outsiders are one of my favorite parts of the season. Instead of just being a guy who cracks jokes, this Beast Boy is actually mature. I really liked Logan Grove as the voice of Beast Boy in Season 2, but I love Greg Sipes' performance here. Sipes also voiced Beast Boy in the original Teen Titans cartoon, but here he has a much more deeper, mature voice. In fact, the whole team is full of my favorite characters. Blue Beetle was one of the best parts of Season 2, and now that he has the Reach Scarab and they're getting along, it's really fun to see them interact. There's also Bart, who really grew on me in Season 2, despite me not really caring for him in the comics. I also really love what they did with El Dorado this season, having him help out victims of metahuman trafficking. But they feel so out of place considering we haven't been following any of these characters for the first half of the show. Nightwing basically just disappears for the middle of the season, Halo and Forager just kind of sit in the Outsiders' headquarters, and Cyborg sits around contemplating why he was crammed into this season. But if they introduced the Outsiders at the start of the season, there would be no problem. Have the old team work covertly while the Outsiders work in the public. None of this where there are 8 separate superhero teams working at once. There's the Justice League in space, Batman Inc., the Anti-Light, these fuckheads, the Outsiders, the original Young Justice team. Oh yeah, and Tim's team's here for like an episode. Seriously, half the plot points this season just feel like members switching teams. Like they make a big deal of Geoforce becoming an outsider. Like, good for you, you were a superhero before, and now you're still a superhero. Congratulations. But you can't just shift the main characters halfway through the show. The pacing does a 180. I like all the teams, but pick one and keep the focus on them. Don't show us this team here for a few episodes and then switch it all up. It just leaves everything all over the place. The previous seasons of Young Justice were episodic in nature, with an overarching story, and it worked really well. And even though a lot of episodes this season are based around a single mission, the main characters spend way too much time doing absolutely nothing. When someone was added to the team in the previous seasons, they might take an episode or two to train them, but usually they just throw them on the team. Here we spend 12 episodes before the new heroes go out on a real mission. Dick constantly keeps telling Brion, patience. But I'm upset as Brion is, just go on a mission. The heroes seem pretty well trained by episode 7, but then they spend another 6 episodes in training. Now, I love getting to see what the heroes are doing outside of the mission. These kinds of scenes build character and show what our characters want outside of being just heroes. But I don't need half a season worth of it. Seriously, the first half of the season feels like I'm watching the characters walk around a hub world while all the levels are blocked off. Now, the other heroes are doing things in the meantime. Batman Inc. invades Santa Prisca, Tim's team gets dialogue for like an episode, and Beast Boy goes on a hallucinated space adventure with a monkey god. And these things are all cool, but don't keep cutting back to the new heroes' training. It honestly amazes me how much time is dedicated to watch these 3 learn how to use their superpowers. The Light are holding an evil, secret, organized meeting. Better check in on the new heroes. Batman's team is invading the League of Shadows, the world's most deadly organization. Better check in on the new heroes. Vandal Savage is protecting the Earth from a mind-controlled army of aliens with his living planet weapon. Better go check in on the new heroes. And once they finally go out on a mission, let's check in on the Space Justice League. Either give them something to do right away, or just don't introduce them until later. The training scenes not only bog down the pacing of the season, they make each episode just feel super choppy. Another example of the pacing problems this season is the whole Terra side plot. Now, Terra plays a pretty big role in the Teen Titans comics. She plays a big part in the Judas Contract storyline, which is widely considered one of the greatest Teen Titans stories of all time. In the comics, she betrays the Titans by acting as a mole for Deathstroke so he can capture and defeat them. So going into the season, people kind of know what to expect from Terra. And in the mid-season finale, we got exactly that. Now, I'm not complaining that it's the same story, because they actually have a really good twist on this in the finale, but it's how they pace her subplot that makes it so unbearable. The team rescues Terra in episode 13, and she doesn't have to betray the team until the finale. There are multiple episodes that end with Terra just menacingly texting Deathstroke like we didn't already know she was evil. Like, there is more than one occasion where Terra texts Deathstroke and is like, do you want me to do anything? And he just goes, nah, I'm good. She gives him like 1 or 2 pieces of relevant information. Half the time she's just like, the team is fighting, and then Deathstroke's just like, okay. Now compare this to season 1 where they also did the mole storyline. And in that season there was so much tension. We didn't know who the mole was as the audience, so we were second guessing everything the team did. And the team caught on to it, so there was so much internal tension between the team trying to figure out who the mole was. It intensified the plot as the season built up to this brilliant reveal in the finale. With the Terra plot, she doesn't do anything until the finale. Like, either have her betray the team earlier, or just not show the audience she's a mole until later in the season. No need to drag the plot out. And on the subject of moles, if Terra betrays the team, there is no need for Dr. Jace to exist. She's the most obvious evil character ever. In one of the episodes, she takes Halo's hair from her hairbrush, which, okay. They have to specifically pay people to animate that hair in, and then spend screen time for Dr. Jace to pick it up, which you just don't do unless she's up to something. Like, she worked for a human trafficking organization where she experimented on kids, and the team just lets her not only work with the heroes, but be the only supervisor for them in their headquarters. Like, I understand Black Lightning's reasoning, because he's banging her, but you're telling me Dick wouldn't be the least bit suspicious of her? If we have the Terra plot, we just don't need the Dr. Jace plot at all. She does the generic Dr. Wells is up to something thing every episode. Again, she doesn't betray the team until episode 22. Just have her betray the team earlier. They aren't building tension, they're just hinting that she's evil every episode. Now let's take a look at the finale. When the finale first came out, I was so disappointed. I thought it was such a letdown. Then I went back and watched it by itself and thought, that's a damn good episode. It's a phenomenal episode, but it's so out of place. The entire plot line of the season is the heroes trying to stop human trafficking. Okay, makes sense. And the main villain of the season is Granny Goodness. She's a minion of Darkseid who is also working with the Light to traffic all these meta-teens into space to use as weapons. The whole season's about putting a stop to meta-human trafficking. And they do that in the third to last episode. Seriously, they defeat the season's main villain in the third to last episode. The penultimate episode is basically just the team resolving a few personal issues. And the finale is just a completely different story. The finale consists of the Light setting up a coup in Brion's home country of Markovia, but Markovia's anti-metahuman laws prevent the heroes from actually entering the country. So in order to stop the coup, the team will need to enter the country, causing an international incident. That way UN Secretary General Lex Luthor can force the heroes to have to register to work for the government. It's a really interesting plot that has nothing to do with the rest of the season. The Light sat around with no plan for the entire season. I figured their plan would involve something with metahuman trafficking, but this whole UN restriction thing is just a completely different plot. And this whole thing wasn't even their grand plan. They obviously have some far greater plan brewing to make the Earth the most powerful planet in the galaxy, but we don't see them doing anything like that this season. Like, if this episode weren't the finale, it would be awesome, but instead the main plot was solved a few episodes ago, so it just feels pretty tacked on. The season wasn't building towards this moment. It was building towards the anti-life equation, which was dealt with in one episode. Compare the last few episodes of this season to the one in previous seasons. In the penultimate episode of season 1, the team are ambushed by the Light, and it ends with the entire Justice League getting brainwashed. In the finale, the team has to fight a whole mind-controlled Justice League to save the universe. And it's amazing. Every single moment in the season was building towards this episode. We see how the technology the Light stole in previous episodes was used to create these mind control devices. We learn who the mole was, and the team finally has to prove they're not only more than just sidekicks, but that they can beat their mentors head on. It's amazing. Season 2, we see the Reach and their alien army meet the Light, each planning on betraying each other. We get insight into both teams of villains. And of course we get the payoff of the team actually infiltrating the Light. The team breaks into the meeting and strikes a massive blow against all the villains. And this is super important because up until now, the Light has done nothing but win. Aqualad takes down his father, and it ends with the Reach setting all of their warships on Earth. Cut to the finale. The League and the Light have to put their differences aside and team up to take down the Reach. It is the end of the story that they were trying to tell. Season 3 does not do that. The penultimate episode is winding down, not setting things up. Now again, it's an amazing episode. The Artemis and Wally stuff is super heartwarming, and they finally resolved that whole Xenomorph plot from season 1. Again, this show has perfect continuity. But I don't want this nice, slow-paced episode at the end of the season. And then when we get to the finale, the team stops the coup in like the first 5 minutes of the episode. Nightwing chucks a stick at Vertigo, the team teleports right on top of Baron Bedlam, and then they take him down because the show doesn't have the budget for fight scenes this season. The real tension in this episode is whether or not Tara betrays the team. And she doesn't, which is refreshing. But the reasoning is because
Batman had surveillance on Slade, and could tell from his micro-expressions that he was lying.
What? But Brion is big on betraying the team. He executes his uncle and goes all,
"Join me. Imagine what we could accomplish together."
on Halo. But don't defeat the villain in the first few minutes of the episode. In fact, a whole lot of episodes do that this season. They finish the mission in record time so they can fit in all these side plots. An early warning, the Outsiders go to Cuba to stop Project Rutabaga, which they hyped up earlier in the season, by the way. So the entire season you're wondering what Project Rutabaga is. There were elaborate fan theories online, it seemed like a big deal. And it turns out it's just Clarion turning people into a giant flesh monster. It has almost nothing to do with the rest of the plot. And the Light doesn't even seem to care about it. After this episode, they just never mention it again. But anyway, the Outsiders stop Project Rutabaga in the first half of the episode. In Elder Wisdom, they don't even show the final fight between the Outsiders and the robots. In Another Freak, there just isn't a mission at all. The new heroes literally just go to school. Like I said, the season story is good. It's just horribly paced. And it's a shame, this is one of my favorite shows. And although I did enjoy Outsiders, it was a struggle to get through at times. A show should make you want to keep watching. It should naturally build tension from the start all the way to the finale. And the finale should pay off all the things that happened in the previous episodes. But Young Justice Outsiders just isn't as well paced as the original show. You can tell the writers are still putting out the same quality of writing, but they were just too ambitious. They tried throwing too much in all at once. I'm sure you could have the exact same story and events and shape them into a really solid season of television. But Young Justice Outsiders has poor pacing. So for my score, I give it a whelmed out of 10. Hey guys, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter at InfinityIncCom1, and don't forget to stay tuned for more videos. If you guys want more Young Justice content, or you have different opinions of Season 3, let me know in the comments below. See you guys next time.